when we talk about the money supply of Bitcoin, again, it's arguably not exactly money, but when we talk about the supply of Bitcoin in general, what we see is that it's asymptotic, right? It will grow up until a certain point, and at some point it will start declining. We are still growing the money, so if this is 2021, we are still growing, but in the beginning it was growing, let's say, at 4 or 5%, and now it's going to 3 to 4%, and eventually it will be 0%, and afterwards it will be a negative percent, some small negative percent because of loss of people who lose their key or frozen accounts or some money that is not being used. So what that means, if we go back to the demand and supply, is that the supply over time not only will stop increasing, but will start decreasing, leading to higher prices, if you remember the demand and supply curves. And I can show you how that works. So now we're going back to the demand and supply. And since really supply is not fixed by the government for Bitcoin, okay, now we're doing the analysis of demand and supply for Bitcoin. Supply, in fact, is not a straight line. Supply also depends on how much money you could harvest, right? So the more money you can harvest from mining Bitcoins, the more Bitcoin miners will be out there, the more they will produce, right? So there is a supply curve. And then there is the demand curve, which is people who want to own Bitcoins. Now what's happening, as I mentioned, is the supply is increasing, but as long as it increases at a rate that is less than the rate of the demand increases, then the prices will stay at or above the rate that they are now. Now the question is, we know for a fact that this is increasing in a slowing rate. So we know that eventually it might even decrease because there will be no more Bitcoins to mine. So now the question is really, is the demand? And lately, when the demand picked up, it was not because of individuals like you and I that are buying Bitcoin, but rather by institutions. And institutions are doing it in order to diversify their risk, to hedge against inflation, and to provide an asset that is uncorrelated to the other assets that they have, for example, the financial assets. At the same time, you might have a few kind of influencers that, billionaires who endorse it, like Michael Saylor, who famously, bought all his treasury money with Bitcoin. And at the same time, you have the inflation expectations that are high, so people want to protect themselves. So what you have now essentially is an increase, equilibrium of the number of Bitcoin that are out there. And what you're seeing now in the beginning of 2021 is an increase from 20,000 to about 40,000 US dollars in a very short period of time because of these massive transitions in the demand for Bitcoin. What is the future of Bitcoin? Well, at the end of the day, it depends on two forces: the demand and the supply. Now, what we know about the supply is that it's capped at 21 million and it's growing at a slow rate. So actually, this, which is usually an unknown when it comes to fiat money, is a known when it comes to Bitcoin. The unknown in Bitcoin is this one. So there is the speculative demand, people who want to be rich fast, they want to move their money in and they want to move their money out. There is the diversification bet, which is I just have other assets and I want to have an asset that is uncorrelated with the assets that I have. The stocks, the real estate, the bonds, the cash.
Precious
metals. And in fact, I would say that precious metal deserves its own category because Bitcoin is seen as digital gold, and there is now a movement away from regular gold to digital gold. So like a sort of a inflation expectation, right? Inflation hedge against inflation in case that the government ends up being too loose with money supply, right? And of course, you have this political ideology, those people who believe that distributed technological governance is superior to government control. And this ideology may be among libertarians, for example, who don't want to have strong government control. So for political and ideological reasons, you might want to actually hold Bitcoin. Those are, I would say, kind of the four major drivers of Bitcoin demand today. Will they increase? I believe that all of them have positive trends, and therefore, year 2021 will be a super year for Bitcoin.